Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ilka Fisher. I am the Education Advocate Coordinator with the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. I work with the Educational Advocacy Program at our organization, and I am joined today with my colleagues Amy Connell and Anthony McKenzie, who are also education advocates, as well as our co-presenter, Dr. Leslie Murdoch, the Education Liaison with the Clark County Department of Family Services. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the at-home behavior support for online learning, and I'll kick it over to Amy.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start with how school closures are happening all over the country as of right now, the world actually, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And while we know that this is critical to our health, it has disrupted our routine and the typical day of our students. As well as our special needs students, and it can be especially hard on them at this time. So we're going to go through some steps in providing supports for these students, as well as identifying some struggles that they may be facing or the family as a whole may be facing. We have been working with Jessica Henschel with Mingo. She is a BCBA in providing ABA services to some of our special ed students. These are some of the struggles with distance learning that she has shared with us. Lack of routine, especially for our special ed students. Lack of structure, lack of support, parents who have had to go back to work and yet school is still happening online, internet connectivity. These are all issues that, our gen ed students as well as our special ed students have been suffering with. So what things Jessica sort of recommended to us was sort of creating a classroom slash school in your home. Create a separate space for your student during distance learning. Make sure that your student has access to a Chromebook or a computer, tablet, laptop. If they need assistive technology device, our schools here have been making sure our students have those. Ensure that you have, as parents and or caregivers, have some kind of connection with the school, whether you're touching base regularly with a special ed facilitator, the teacher of record. Make sure that you're either touching base once a week. I have a student that we are trying to meet with the team on a monthly basis, just to make sure that the student is getting everything they need to be successful in school.
Hello all, good afternoon. Thank goodness we're entering those nice months here in Vegas. So right now we're going to go on to resources to use in your distance education classroom. This is a better way to keep kids engaged while they're using the distance learning format. So you want to create a relaxing environment wherever their classroom setting is. You want to make sure there's no distracting lights, but you want a nice ambient light, no distracting sounds. If they have a virtual background, that's always nice, like my nice forested background. I'm here in Vegas. That's obviously not my background. Keep up with homeroom activities, positive sayings and quotes. The hang in there kitty poster. It could help. Stuff like that kind of keeps kids happy, keeps them focused. You also want to add in brain breaks on contingent on target behavior. So if they're getting frustrated with the math problems, give them that little 5-minute brain break. Let them stretch. Let them shake it out. Keep them in that classroom though. You don't want them to go wander off too much and play with their toys or anything. Other things you want to make sure they're doing exercises, some push-ups, some sit-ups, some jumping jacks. Just keep the body loose, keeps the mind flowing. Board games like Hangman or Tic-Tac-Toe are fun too. Provide worksheets and coloring pages to kind of keep that artistic side engaged. Google Games too to also keep them engaged, learning how to use the computer through distance learning. Freeze Dance, Simon Says, Go Noodle. These are other games that are good for your younger kiddos. YouTube and music videos. So music that kind of keeps them focused, keeps them energetic, keeps them on track. Some helpful routines used during distance learning. You want to set a good school routine and home routine. So my son's in third grade, he's 8, so we wake up every morning, about 10 minutes before 7. He makes his bed, he brushes his teeth, gets his clothes on for the day. We make him breakfast. It's all very routine. It keeps him going. And then he logs in at 7:50. So you want to have them have a routine because they know it's their school day, even though they're at home. Uh, you want to, so the examples that we're going to use though here is if a typical day starts with writing and moves on to science, gym, lunch, recess, math, and snack, and ends with music, parents can loosely structure at-home learning activities in this order. Plan out the students' goals and deadlines for the day and week. Use visual supports to communicate student goals. A whiteboard or I don't think anybody has a chalkboard. But we have a whiteboard in my house, and we kind of write up his daily goals or his weekly goals, and we put it right over his computer. And then ask your teachers and your service providers for the tools they use at school, so you can use it at home when you're recreating that classroom setting at home. Supports for distance student and parent supports for distance learning. Learn to take a break. You can get frustrated too. The kids will get frustrated to take a break. So you want to include gross motor activities to encourage both physical and mental well-being. Use your time for family connection by doing activities outside together. These are those nice months in Vegas. It's not scorching heat outside anymore, so you can take the dog for a walk, take your kid for a walk, play catch, just do something outside to get them loose, get some sunlight on them, some vitamin D going. Setting up virtual and social meetings with peers and other family members also kind of provides social interaction that they need right now with COVID. Not everybody's having parties right now. You don't want to spread COVID. So setting up virtual play dates helps a lot. You want to include self-care as part of the day too. You want parents to schedule time each day to do something that recharges them, such as taking a nap, meditation or prayer, reading a book for pleasure, engaging in a favorite hobby or activity. Working the focus pads with my son when he puts his boxing gloves on. I love to do that. It keeps him focused and engaged too. Uh, so on this, you want to understand how your child's school is delivering school schedule, classes, learning, etc. So know your school's point of contact or POC, the case manager, the special education teacher for their IEP or their 504 liaison. That's usually the counselor. You want to know who to contact, whether it's your principal or assistant principal or the CEF, the special education instructional facilitator. You want to consider what struggles your child is going to have based on the learning delivery model. So what do they keep running into? Is it connectivity issues? Is it a disconnect with some of the classes like art and PE have kind of been different? I mean, just watching that as an observer, that's different. So make sure you're observing and watching what's going on with them there. You want to read the IEPs and 504s and determine if what's written out in those IEPs and 504s are currently working with distance learning. Write down your concerns, any changes that need to be made. Request that IEP meeting or that 504 meeting, and that's where you want to know who your point of contact is. If minor changes need to be made, document your concerns, email the point of contact, and usually allows 2 to 3 weeks for the school and the parents to get back and schedule or for that meeting. Schedule time to talk with the people at the school, or if your teachers, time to talk with the parents, discuss your solutions or your suggestions, and communicate regularly with their kiddos' needs. This is the kind of time when you can request a weekly progress report, and that shouldn't be a big deal at all. We're all doing emails, we're all doing messages, and then you know. Yeah, ask the schools for any educational recommendations that they think would help benefit your kid. Communication is the biggest part right now. Come up with routine check-ins, communication plans, and make sure that your IEPs are reflecting the needs of your kiddo. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Ilka.
Great. So some considerations for IEPs and 504s, some accommodations and supports that can be provided during the online hybrid service overview. So like we previously mentioned, set up a home school communication plan. You can schedule an IEP or 504 revision or do the annual meeting earlier. So at this point, the Clark County School District has until October 2nd in order to conduct the IEP revisions just to make the changes for the synchronous and asynchronous minutes. But you can ask for a formal meeting. We discussed that yesterday, but just to give a brief overview, you can request that meeting, change the supports, make sure that your student their plan is reflective of what they need during this time. Also, going further into this, update the present levels and where the student is at right now educationally. So take the old IEP that was conducted when school was in session and then compare it to what's going on right now. What are the struggles? At this point, the school should have pulled data. And so take the data that has been collected and then determine what needs to change in the plan. Also, make sure that you provide your feedback. If you see that something is not working during this online hybrid learning process, make sure that you let the school know and that they address this in the IEP. You can also update the goals benchmarks and include strong academic goals in online hybrid learning goals. You know, a lot of the times the schools are trying to do these informal meetings at this point. So make sure you request that you have a formal meeting with all required members. So then that way you can make those changes to the IEP. You also want to update the special education time and minutes and the location if needed. So if you think that your child would benefit from one-on-one time with the teacher, make sure you include that in the IEP. You can also update modifications, accommodations, and include online hybrid supports. So specific home and school communication plan. Maybe you need recorded lessons, the school homework accommodations. So like we mentioned yesterday, maybe the child needs to just master in the assignment rather than completing the whole assignment. So taking a 10-word or 10-question assignment, and then once the student shows mastery after the third or fourth question, if they are successful and they show that they can do it, maybe that they have accommodations that say that they don't have to complete the rest of the assignment. You can also look into breaks. You know, a lot of these students are asked to be online for a large portion of time throughout the day. So make sure that you schedule breaks within that time. Also, the space in which they are taking these classes, make sure they feel comfortable in that space. If you have multiple students in the home, you want to make sure that they feel comfortable. Maybe if they're around other students while they're in class, maybe that's not comfortable for them. I have a case that I just met with this morning where the student, he will be taking his classes outside in the backyard. That's the whole space in the backyard is just for him. So maybe that works better for your child. Keep those things in mind. You also want to specify when special education support should happen and what's best for your child. So supporting them during the independent time, those asynchronous times. Maybe we can look at if they're not having the live in-class portion, maybe we can take some time to do some asynchronous one-on-one supports with the teacher. And then look at those virtual schedules. A lot of our students are very visual, so they like to look at graphic schedules. That's something that can be done through Canvas. I have several students that are utilizing those graphic organizers through the Canvas portal. And also, identify outside supports. So behavior supports in schools and in the individualized education plans. Behavior supports should be identified and added to in all the following areas in the child's IEP and to support the learning distance model. So present levels, description of the behavior goals and benchmarks, the specifically designed instruction, so they refer to this as the SDI, the amount of time the student will be provided with the instruction for behavior, also the accommodations, modifications, and supports, and then if they need a functional behavioral assessment or a behavior intervention plan. They refer to these as the FBA or the BIP. And then, like I previously mentioned, we want to also look into outside supports for online learning. So a lot of our students are struggling at this time and they might benefit from tutoring. There are options out there for our foster care kiddos as well as kiddos that are not in foster care in regards to tutoring supports. So if you see that a student that is currently living in your home might need additional supports through tutoring services, please reach out to your caseworker, to the team, to the school, and they can point you in the right direction. Some schools are collaborating with like UNLV in order to provide these tutoring supports. So please keep that in mind. Also, outside supports can include therapy, behavior supports. There are parenting classes out there. For example, through the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, we are in partnership with Boyd Education Clinic, and we are offering parenting classes every Monday at 4 p.m. So if you're interested in attending those classes, those will go all the way through November. So please feel free to join in on those sessions as well. Make sure you utilize advocates and consultants, our office is here to support you. So myself, my team, as well as Dr. Leslie Murdoch, who works for the Department of Family Services, we're here to support you. So please utilize our support. Also, any city, county programs, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, the libraries, there are programs that are offered through these community organizations that you can benefit from. Maybe supports in the community that you didn't know was out there. They're partnering very closely with us in regards to the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club, as well as libraries are offering tutoring supports. So please make sure you look into the community supports as well. And with that, I think Leslie's going to get into a little bit more of the behavior intervention plan.
Great. Hi, everybody. So it's wonderful to partner with the Legal Aid Center. Their education and advocacy team has been wonderful in supporting families and getting information out. As the education liaison for the Department of Family Services and also having my own consulting business, we want to provide for you guys information. And the first part of our presentation is a little bit more of how you can kind of set up your classroom at home. What are the outside resources available for you? This next part is a little bit more about how to actually provide behavioral support in your home. So one of the things, again, with all the outside support, please, again, if you do have a child in foster care, please reach out to your caseworkers if you're struggling, because they can provide services. Also, if your children are receiving any sort of service, find out, because actually community providers all work together, so they may have some recommendations for you as well. But we continuously at the agency get information about resources and any organizations that we can partner with. But again, for those of you that also just have families at home, there are a lot of community agencies. So just reach out. The libraries are a wonderful resource too. So what we're going to talk about right now is behavioral support at home. So what's really nice is that the law and best practices mirror each other. So the law actually supports some of the best practices out there. So the big focus of behavior support is looking at the idea of positive behavioral support. So what that is that something where you attack, you kind of work on behaviors from a particular model. So the first part of when we say positive behavioral supports is that we work on positive strategies. So we look at how can we modify the environment for the child, how can we promote positive behaviors instead of negative behaviors, and try to reduce anything that is inappropriate or things, any sort of behaviors in which, because one of the things, again, in working behavior mentors and a lot of us in the field, children are displaying behaviors for a reason. Most of the time they're trying to communicate something, they're trying to avoid something, they may be trying to gain something, which we'll talk about, but understanding a little bit more about why the behavior is occurring and what is going on makes a very big difference in terms of behavioral support. So the first thing is looking at strategies. The second thing is that we actually have to teach kids positive skills to replace the negative behaviors with positive ones. And that's sort of the same function. And then finally, we also need to look at what are interventions. What are the different things we can put into place to change things? So we're actually going to go over that with you guys as we kind of move along. So that's what the law says, but the law supports best practices. Positive behavioral support. So a lot of times what we're looking at is we're looking at the root cause of the behavior versus managing the behavior. So rather than, if we have a child, for example, that hits other children or screams in the middle, I know that I have a lot of clients right now who the kids are showing what looks like frustration. So they're very angry, or they don't want to do their work, or they don't want to pay attention. Again, when I say they don't want to, they can't sometimes pay attention. What we want to look at what the root cause of the behavior is. So again, in my example, let's say another child, we don't have this as much now, but let's say a child goes up to another child and hits the child. If we were not doing positive behavioral support, we might put something in for the child to teach him not to hit other kids. That would be the natural reaction. However, with positive behavioral support, what we would do is look at why is that child hitting another child? So if you actually think about it, there could be multiple reasons the child might hit another child. One might be that he doesn't know any way he wants to be friends with that child, and he hit the child because he wants that child's attention. Another thing that could have happened is maybe that child did something that annoyed the child, and so therefore in which the child hit that child out of frustration and didn't know how to do something. Um, and so if you look at those two examples, the action is the same by hitting the child, but the actual function or what the child is trying to do is very different. So we really have to try to understand why the child is behaving in that way, what's kind of motivating that, what might be the reason, and then we want to replace that behavior. So we're not just looking at the actual instance. And a lot of the times in schools, we really focus on changing the behavior in a way in which we just change the actual behavior. So we say, okay, we'll teach the child not to hit. But again, if we know the child is hitting for attention, then we need to teach the child how to get positive attention, not negative attention. If the child is hitting the other child because they're frustrated, then we need to teach the child how to manage frustration in a more positive way so that, you know, he has something, a different way, a more adaptive way of dealing with that. So again, same behavior, but different functions. When we know the function of the behavior, then it gives us a much better indication as to how we can change it. And that's where positive behavioral supports come in. It's the why of the behavior, treating the why, not just the what. In schools, which we'll talk about, this is considered there's a behavior intervention plan. It's a more formalized approach. However, today what we're going to go over is an informal way of using that approach at home. So even though it's very formalized, it's an approach. It's a behavior management strategy that can absolutely be used at home. It can be used in a less formalized manner, and we're going to go through what that might look like. Okay, so formal and informal behavior intervention plans. Again, as I mentioned, they're a plan based on data about the behaviors, and they are going to look at strategies. They're going to look at, the whole child. And I think one of the important things to mention is under the law, behavior is considered anything non-academic. So when we say behaviors, a lot of the time we think about more like kind of aggressive type behaviors like hitting, slapping, tantruming, those kinds of things. But anything that's non-academic is considered behavior under the law. So these plans and what we're discussing can also, for example, under behavior, attention, a lack of attention, because if a child has ADHD and can't pay attention, that would be considered behavior. If a child has a hard time organizing information or finishing a project or not turning in assignments, that is considered a behavior. If it's not due to academics, but just due to lack of organization or, again, certain things going on. So when we say the word behavior, it's not just about something that is considered kind of more aggressive. It's anything besides academics that might be affecting education. So we just want to make sure that that's clear as well. So again, as I mentioned, the behavior plan is basically a plan on how to change the negative behaviors into positive behaviors and then adding different supports that go along. So schools actually have formalized behavior plans. If your child, you see behaviors that are happening or are happening in school, you may already have a behavior intervention plan. If you don't, you can ask the school to create one with you guys. If they see some of the same behaviors, you actually can create a home and school one, or you can just decide to create your own at home one because maybe the behaviors that are happening at home. So you can do that as well. It really depends on if you're seeing some of the same behaviors, but the schools are there to support you. They can actually help you with this if this is something you want to do. But then also if you just want to create a behavior intervention plan at home in a more simple fashion, you are absolutely able to do that. And I will tell you that they do work. So if you actually implement the strategies and are consistent with them, they do change behaviors. You may have to tweak them a little bit based on the child's reaction, but again, they definitely work if you do implement them. So BIPs are created either by teachers, staff, or by yourself, and they should be based on data, which we'll talk about. Data in some of these are, we call them capital D data, which would be something a school takes, but you at home can absolutely take your own data and get a sense as to what's going on with your child. It doesn't have to be a formalized process. It's just enough to collect so that you know that there's a pattern of behavior. So once you notice that a pattern of behavior is emerging, then it's time to start looking at collecting data to get a little bit more information about it. So as I mentioned, you can do one in school, you could do a joint school home one, or you could just do a home one, whatever you feel like might be best for your child. So what are the components of a behavior intervention plan or a BIP? There are about 7 different components, and we'll go over each one of these. But the general flow is the idea of collecting data about what's going on with your child. Then you're going to create some different replacement behavior. So you're going to replace the negative behavior with something a little bit more positive. With that positive change, we have to put in some proactive strategies and supports because changing a behavior is really difficult. So we need to be able to put those in to be able to support and to cause some incentive to be able to make those changes. Then after that, we have to know that probably our kids are going to regress every once in a while, and we're going to see some of those negative behaviors. So we want to look at how do we handle when that happens? What does that look like? And then finally, at the end, after implementing a behavior plan for anywhere, it can be like 6 to 9 weeks. It's a really good thing to implement a behavior plan for about 6 weeks minimally. Takes about 3 weeks to even get used to making a change in a behavior. So what we do is after about 6 weeks is a really good time to kind of like regroup, kind of check in, see is this working, is it not working, do I have to make any changes, and then maybe even make a new change, make a goal change, which we'll talk about too. But that's kind of the flow of it. Now I'll go in a little bit more to the specifics as we go along. So when we talk about the first thing is we have to collect some data. And again, as a parent, please don't worry about any formalized methods. There are some forms, etc. You can look online. You could even look under functional behavioral assessment data collection, and they might even be some form for you. But the idea is just collecting information, as I mentioned, about the function. When I say the word function, what that means is what is the child getting out of it? I know that sounds very, very abstract, but the idea is that we all do something for a reason. So what we're trying to do is figure out what the reason is that child is doing it for. So in my example, and we'll call it little Johnny, Johnny was hitting a kid. Again, if we don't know the reason he's hitting the kid, it's going to be really hard pressed for us to kind of change that behavior. So we have to start kind of figuring that out. So for example, again, if something always happens before Johnny hits a kid and we notice that he gets really angry before he hits a kid, then that might be some data that gives us an indication that it's a frustration. Basically he's letting out his frustration in a negative way. If we notice that little Johnny is hitting a kid because he really likes this kid and he's trying to hang out with him, and he just, goes up to him and kind of nothing happens before and he's smiling and he just kind of smacks the kid, then we know maybe he just wants that kid's attention. So again, looking at the circumstances surrounding the actual behavior gives us a much better indication as to what's happening. So what we talk about is the three components of the FBA, or the three things we're looking at, the three W's: the where, the what, and the why of the behavior. So the first thing is, as we look at the where, is there particular circumstances where that behavior occurs almost all the time? Do we notice it's in a particular class? Is it during a particular time of day? Is it during, for example, group instruction? Or is it always, do we see the behavior during independent learning time? So what we're looking at is we're looking at when does that behavior most likely occur? And so that's kind of what we're looking under: what circumstances, where, settings. It can be some kids, again, get exhausted by the afternoon. So we see more of the behaviors in the afternoon versus the morning. Or there could be like sometimes, again, if a kid has a hard day, we notice, or they're switching back and forth between homes, or kids in care have had some trauma, or maybe they've seen their parent. There may be certain times in which these things occur. The next part is that what, which kind of bleeds into what I was describing too. We have to look at what happened prior to the behavior. So again, it's not just about the hitting, for example, with Johnny, or it's not just the fact that Johnny's not turning in his missing assignments. We have to look at, again, what's going on with that. Has anything happened before? Did he miss the instruction? Is he, again, trying to get attention, those. So we're looking at the what of the behavior and trying to get a sense of the whole picture, not just Johnny hit someone. And sometimes teachers will, it's not, again, they're not necessarily doing this on purpose, but they'll just give information: Johnny hit someone. Well, that's great, but what happened before? When did it happen? So we're looking at that, again, larger picture. And more importantly, as I mentioned, the function of why. Why are they not turning in? So for some students, I mentioned the Johnny example, but for also some students, they're not turning in their work, for example, or they're not doing well on tests. So the question becomes, for example, is it that they're not paying attention during instruction? Is it that they have a really hard time being able to focus during independent work? They can't work on their own. Is it that they're lost? They don't really know how to deal with the instruction, or they don't know where to turn in their assignments. Each one of those, like if it's an attentional issue, if it's a I'm overwhelmed, too much work issue, if it's a I don't know where to turn things in, each one of those has a different solution. So we really need to know the why. So again, as a parent or a caregiver, or if you, by the way, if you are not home with your children because you're working and there's someone at home, this is anybody can do this and just kind of take a small period of time, watch the child, take a little bit of data, and then try to kind of figure out what's going on. And again, it doesn't have to be formalized. It's just the idea you as a parent or a caregiver or the person being with your child while you're at work can get that information to figure out what's happening with the child. So the next part is what we call a replacement behavior. So again, when we know that the skill that a child is doing something for a particular purpose, we're now going to replace that skill to help them. So as mentioned, a lot of the times the function of behavior is either to gain something, to avoid something, or even it can be an outlet of frustration. So if we know in the scenario with Johnny that Johnny is hitting somebody because he's frustrated, then we need to teach him a different tool or a way to deal with his frustration where he's not hitting a kid, something that would not hurt anybody, something that he can actually use honestly for the rest of his life to help him to manage frustrations. So maybe he takes a break. Maybe he goes to a cooling off spot. Maybe he does. Some kids actually have a really hard time kind of even de-escalating. So when they get really angry, they need, or frustrated, they need to have almost like a physical outlet. So maybe Johnny does 10 jumping jacks when he's really angry. And by the way, that's a really good jumping jacks, bouncing a ball, doing something that is kind of almost a physical manifestation that is not something that is towards another person, but can also outlet that really helps. So that's an example of something that Johnny can do. So what it does is he's allowed to express his frustration, but now it's no longer in a negative way. The new positive behavior is he will do jumping jacks when he's frustrated. Or for example, again, if Johnny is hitting another kid because he wants attention, we're going to teach Johnny instead to go up to the kid and say, hey, can I tell you a joke? We're going to teach Johnny how to get appropriate attention. Maybe we teach Johnny how to go up to a person and say, hey, will you play with me? Or, hey, would you like to, we teach him a board game and he goes up to the person. So the replacement behavior for that, for example, again, would be teaching Johnny how to appropriately get someone's attention. So these are things, again, it's the same function of the behavior, but it's a positive way to do it. So we want to replace that so that Johnny can see that, oh, I can get attention in a good way, or I can let off my frustration in a good way where I won't get in trouble and it won't hurt anybody else, but that I will actually be able to do something about how I'm feeling. So again, the idea is that the replacement behavior must be functionally equivalent to the behavior. A lot of the times our kids are doing negative things because they get immediate attention. So I hate to say it, when they're doing positive things, we also want to give them immediate attention. So the minute Johnny is doing his replacement behavior and he goes up to a kid and he says, hey, will you play with me? We want to be able to praise Johnny. Oh my gosh, it's so great that you went up to that kid. And we want to encourage maybe the other kids secretly, could you go play with Johnny? Because he's asking you really nicely. Same thing with if Johnny now starts doing his jumping jacks instead of hitting a kid when he's frustrated, we want to immediately reward that and show Johnny something positive. Thank you so much. You're using your, it's so great that you're doing your jumping jacks. So, and whenever possible, we want to try and ignore the negative behavior if we can, because if we start shifting things and if they're getting an immediate response from the negative, we want to try not to give them the immediate response for the negative. We want to give the immediate response for the positive. So it's the idea of actually saying, okay, I'm going to wait. When you're ready, I'm going to come up and talk to you. So we want to be able to kind of wait out some of that negative and try to flip it where they get something from us when they're doing the positive, not the negative. And the other thing about this too is that when we're teaching these behaviors, we want to do them during calm times. We don't want to always do them when they're in the mood, when they're in that mode. So when we're teaching Johnny to, for example, do his jumping jacks, we're going to talk to him, or we're going to pretend, or we're going to even see, Johnny, I know you get really frustrated when you're overwhelmed by school. Let's practice our jumping jacks. And you actually go out and you practice it so it becomes automatic rather than doing it. So when he starts practicing those jumping jacks, and if you practice a couple times a day, you could even give scenarios to Johnny. What if you have a really hard time, on your work? Let's get up and let's do our jumping jacks. Or let's say this person said something upset you. We're going to go up and do our jumping jacks. So if you do that and you practice it during calm times, when the frustration times come in, it's been practiced, they'll go into an automatic response to be able to do it. So that's kind of how those replacement skills. So we're going to figure out next step is what is that replacement skill we're going to actually decide for the child. So when we are talking about replacement skills, we also have to put an incentive plan because behavior change is very, very difficult, even as adults, for us to change a behavior. So we have to put something that rewards ourselves when we're using it. It's the same thing for our kiddos. It'd be really nice in a wonderful world that our kids see the benefit of it. I mean, hopefully there's some natural benefits. So if Johnny is no longer smacking the child and he's trying to get attention, when he stops smacking the child is more likely to engage in a positive behavior and wanting to hang out with him than when he does. So there's always going to be hopefully some natural or intrinsic value, but until then we also may want to put in some sort of incentive plan. So one of the big things we can do is if Johnny does his jumping jacks and he gets to watch his favorite YouTube video when he's done, or he gets to, you can decide, or the school can decide on what those particular incentives or what rewards that Johnny will get. The biggest thing and the biggest issue is I also would really, with time frames right now, parents, and the fact that you're working and you have multiple kids, just make sure that whatever you're able to give to a child is reasonable and you're able to do it. One of the biggest issues that happens sometimes is that you can put together a rewards plan, but the rewards plan, if you can't deliver it or it's not delivered on time, those kids will notice it. Hey, mom, you're supposed to give me my reward. And if you're not there and you're not giving it consistently, kids are very smart and they may actually lose interest in making the change. So when you come up with a plan, try to make it reasonable, something you can do, that you can deliver with enough frequency that you're able to do. And again, it doesn't necessarily always have to be material. You don't have to go out and buy a lot of things. Some of our kids really enjoy spending time with a sibling or spending time maybe doing like a special game with you as a parent or a caregiver or a trusted adult. And they could do that for a short period of time. So it could be a gift of time. It could be a gift of attention. It could be a gift of, it definitely material stuff is perfectly okay. So think about, what are the things that the child will want. It's also really great to do your incentive plan with the child. So if you guys can even come up with a list of rewards, and you can even say, Johnny, if you are doing your jumping jacks all the time and we're practicing it at the end of this week, let's pick from one of these, or which one should we work on this week? Which one are you can actually put together what they call a menu of rewards. And you could even have some ones that are kind of littler rewards and some bigger rewards. One of the biggest things that is really important in the beginning is to reward any sort of change. So in the beginning, you actually want to give even more of the rewards. You want to make sure that when you're planning for Johnny, when he's not hitting anymore, the minute he stops hitting, you give him a reward in the beginning, because you want to celebrate that. You want him to feel good knowing he's making different choices. And then you kind of lengthen out the reward. So in the beginning, there's a lot of good job, Johnny. You did a great job. Keep up the good work. I know I'm kind of talking about Johnny and a little bit more of a younger kids, but this can be done also with older kids as well. So again, if they're working towards, let's say, some sort of material, or they're working for something, as they, if a child's not turning in their work and all of a sudden they start turning in a couple, assignments and you're seeing some consistency, that's a good time to, for example, bring home a special lunch for your teenager, or spend time, or if they want something in particular, a particular book or a particular game or something like that you're willing to give a reward, it's a really good time to do that. So definitely, add those rewards. We all need rewards, at any given time when we're kind of making behavior choices. Positive strategies and supports, as I mentioned, this is also where you can actually provide some environmental changes. You can provide some people, like, again, if let's say Johnny really likes his teacher, maybe you could actually ask his teacher, hey, if Johnny doesn't hit, or if Johnny is turning his assignments in, could he have 5 minutes to spend with you? And maybe the teacher could actually do something super fun with Johnny, just himself, so he feels a little bit singled out. The other thing you can do is kind of do environmental changes. So again, if a kid needs a cooling off spot, you could make a really nice cooling off spot in your house to be able to do that, or find a place. You also can do visual reminders. You could do like a little sign saying, when I'm frustrated, I will do my jumping jacks. And, again, you could kind of go over and do jumping jacks. You could do videos of jumping jacks, like different things that you can do to, again, just continue to provide incentives. Token boards can be used. One of the nice things about like a token board, a sticker chart, or those are more for our younger kids, but for even the older kids, like if you actually give them a goal, like if you turn in 3 assignments, or if I see you did 3 assignments, I will go ahead and grab your favorite sandwich, or I'll take you out for ice cream, or whatever you're comfortable with at this particular time. And they do that. That really, again, helps. It's ways for them to track if they're actually getting it. So it's really nice to have some visual information, especially with with the younger ones, they can see how much progress they're making by how many times they've earned their rewards. And then they can be really proud of them. So you could do it kind of incrementally, like you get a daily reward, and then at the end of the week, you get a weekly reward. And then at the end, you could actually say, oh my God, this week you got all your daily rewards, or, make it reasonable. By the way, not every single time is it going to work. So you want to have like your rewards or your incentives to be very reasonable at where that child is right now. Like if they're tantruming every day, or I refuse to work every day, you don't want to make your goal that they will do their work every single day. That's probably unrealistic. Let's say that they'll do it 3 times a week, that they will do it. So you want to make your goals very reasonable as you go along. So unfortunately, you're doing all this behavior plan changing, you're trying to give incentives, et cetera, but there's just going to be times in which that those behaviors are going to come back. So maybe you'll get a surge for a little while of a child turning in their missing information, missing assignments. Other times, for example, Johnny is definitely not hitting anymore. He's doing his jumping jacks, or he's asking kids to play with him. But maybe at some point he gets frustrated and either hits, or he does, maybe not in COVID times he hits a child, but he'll say something inappropriate to get inappropriate behaviors. So when that happens, what we want to do is, the best thing to do is actually remind them of their replacement behavior. So if and when that occurs, you say, hey, Johnny, remember what we talked about? We're going to do our jumping jacks instead. Or, hey, I know that we talked about those missing assignments. Do you think you can, get those in? I know you're starting to go down. You were doing such a great job. How about we can get one in at a time? Let's pick one that we can turn in for right now. So what you want to do is you want to try and figure out to kind of get them back on track. It could be, by the way, verbal reminders. You can remind them of certain things. But when they're engaging in the negative behaviors, often they're going to be getting a negative response, or something is going to kind of turn out negative. Like if someone doesn't turn assignments, their grades are going to start going down. If Johnny, again, hits, that kid's not going to want to hang out with him anymore. So what you want to do is actually point those out deep after the behavior occurs. Remind them what you're supposed to be working towards, what the advantages are, and also mention, hey, when you hit, when you went ahead and hit, how do you think that kid felt? Do you think that kid wants to be your friend? Did you notice that he wanted to be your friend when you were nice to him, but he wasn't trying to be your friend when you hit him? So you want to actually debrief with the child about how what they did may not have been as positive, and how if they had used their replacement skill, that it would have been a better situation for the child. So that's where you kind of clue them into that. Last but not least, so you're putting all these things into place. What you want to do is you want to try your kind of behavior plan for, again, I would say we kind of talk about it a little bit more on a quarterly basis when we talk about schools. But for you at home, I definitely would think about it minimally at a monthly basis. Try it for a month, is what I would recommend, just to give you an idea. And the idea is take data. Is it working? So if we've decided that, and sometimes, by the way, it doesn't work. Let's say Johnny, again, is hitting because he's frustrated, and we decided for his plan, he is going to go to a cooling off area every time he's frustrated. And we're practicing, but you know what? Johnny's not just going to this cooling off area. So what we may want to think about is, that's not a replacement behavior that works for Johnny. So let's figure out, could we try jumping jacks? Could we try bouncing a ball? Can we try silly putty? He pulls it apart when he's frustrated, or something like that too. So what may happen is, we may need, if it's not working, here are the most common reasons why it would not work. One is that if we need to make sure we know exactly why Johnny is hitting, why the child's not turning and missing assignments. For example, if a child is not turning and missing assignments because they're too hard for him, that's one issue. If there's too many assignments, that's a different issue, because if it's too hard, we need to get them more academic support and see what we can do. If it's too many assignments, we need to cut down on the amount of assignments. So again, same behavior, not turning in assignments, 2 different functions. So we need to make sure that we have the right function identified. So it's okay if you don't know what it is. Try something for a little while. If it's not working, it may be the wrong function at that point. Sometimes if the replacement goes too hard, or it's not as satisfactory to the child, we need to replace it. That was my example of some kids who really are frustrated and have a little bit more of a physical manifestation of something, like they're tantruming, etc. The replacement behavior of sit quietly with your hands at your desk is not going to work for those children. We might need to give them something more physical to do when they're frustrated. So we want to make sure that it meets the intensity, meets what they're trying to do to make that work. Eventually, it'd be nice for the child not to do the jumping jacks. The next step might be, instead, after the jumping jacks, now to find a cooling off area or take a break. But our first steps, we need to make sure that replacement behavior fits the almost the emotionality, the emotional response to it. Sometimes our kids lose interest in the reward system. Like if they, often we have to change that up a lot when it comes to behavior plans. So it's great. There may be a point, and I've seen kids do this. So it's like, I don't want to go for ice cream anymore. I'm tired of that. Or I don't want to do this anymore. So we may need to change up the reward, or we may need to increase the reward for that particular child to make things a little bit easier for that child. And then finally, one of the biggest things that happen, and it is not your fault if you do this as a parent, I know I'm guilty of it, most parents are, is that sometimes if you promise a large set of rewards and you don't deliver, then the child may actually decide that it's not worth it, or, oh, you know what, I don't even get the reward. Why would I even want to do this? It's much easier to go back to the old behavior. So you really have to make sure that as a parent, caregiver, or anyone delivering the rewards, it's feasible for you. It makes sense. You can deliver it. If you can take your child out for lunch at the end of the week, that's great. But if that is not something that you can do, maybe again, instead it's a 5-minute or like 20 minutes at home doing something of their choice together. It doesn't have to cost money, or it doesn't have to be anything big, but just make sure that you as a parent or a caregiver, whoever's working with the child, is able to actually deliver that. At the end of the 6 weeks, if it's not working, try to kind of shift a little bit or try something different to make it work. If it did work, then that's great. You either can continue with it, or you may have to, you can change the goal. So let's say you want your child not to tantrum as much and get positive attention instead of negative, and they're doing it maybe 3 times a week. Now you're going to ask them to do it 4 times a week, and you may have to increase the incentive at that point. So anytime you're upping the ante, you may need to add a little bit more of the incentive or make a change to it or something like that too. And you can do behavior plans for the rest of your lives. So, again, my running joke is I put my husband on a behavior plan, my children are on behavior plans. I am personally on a behavior plan to try and get more exercise. So I am personally right now I am trying to make sure that I go for a walk 3 days a week, because my replacement behavior, especially at night, is I like to sit down and eat a whole box of white cheddar popcorn. That is my favorite thing to do because I'm bored. My function is I'm bored, and I say instead of being bored, I need to go for a walk. So I actually put in my replacement behaviors a walk. I put in incentives to be able to do, if I go for a walk 3 days a week, that I go and get to buy myself a cute workout outfit or a cute t-shirt, because that's something that's actually related. And then incentives I have is, I'll be honest with you, I do not keep white popcorn in the house anymore because I can eat an entire bag full of white popcorn. I make sure that my tennis shoes are by the door. I actually wear a walking outfit all day to be able to get myself to go. And then, my running joke is my consequence strategy. If I'm back on the couch eating my popcorn, then I tell the kids, take the popcorn away from me, throw it out, push me out the door, and have me go for a walk. And so you can implement your own behavior plans. It works if you implement it. So as silly as it sounds, my running joke is you can put your husband on a behavior plan, you can put your children on behavior plan, you yourself can go through this as well. And it really does work. So that's my kind of like running funny joke with you guys as to how you could actually, behavior plans can be implemented on your own. They can be implemented with people around you. Anybody can implement their own behavior plan, but also with children. So yeah, so that's kind of how behavior switches and behavior again can make it. So these behavior plans absolutely can be implemented at home. There's something you guys can try. If you need any assistance with it, again, feel free to reach out to the Legal Aid Center, reach out to us, but they definitely work. So this is just kind of our way of discussing and showing you a little bit about how that all works. So if you have any questions over here, you can see that this is information on our co-presenters. So Ilka and Amy and Anthony's contact information is right here. Feel free to email them. My information is over here again, if anybody has any questions or wants to know more about behavior plans. And thank you for being here with us today. If you guys have any questions, this is a really good time to put those in the chat. We're happy to answer. I didn't think we see anything, so this is a really good time in which if any of you guys have any questions and you want to write to us, we'll answer those. And if not, we thank you guys for being here today. We wish you the best of luck. We know it's hard right now working with your children at home. You may have multiple children. You may be, trying to hold down a job. You're trying to do all these different things. So these are just suggestions and strategies to help you. But, please know, just do the best that you can. And as the tips came in the beginning, take care of yourself, give yourself some slack, be patient, and do the best that you can. And that's really all we can do right now.